I have installed 3 water softeners, 2 septic systems, a full workshop in my basement, and every inch of hardwood floor in a house that has stood since 1974. I did not expect my heart to be the next thing that needed fixing. The cardiologist, a woman named Dr. Abernathy, who spoke the way people speak when they have delivered the same news 300 times and have made their peace with that, told me that triple bypass surgery at 67 was, in her words, very manageable. She said it the way people say, it's just a formality, when it is not their chest being opened. I thanked her. I have been thanking people politely for 67 years. It is a habit I developed early and have never once benefited from. Welcome to Dad's harsh revenge. Get comfortable. This one's going to stay with you. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed. I promise you want to be here for this. My name is Bernard Kowalski. I am 67 years old. I spent 38 years working as a master electrician. I understand circuits. I understand exactly how current moves, where it goes, what happens when a connection fails. I just never imagined I'd spend the last years of my life doing the same diagnosis on my own family. I told my 2 children and my son-in-law about the surgery 8 weeks before the scheduled date. 8 weeks. I want you to sit with that number. Not 8 hours. Not 8 days. 8 weeks, 56 days, during which a calendar existed, phones worked, and the drive from Columbus to my house in Dayton was 43 minutes on a clear afternoon. I'll tell you what each of them did with those 56 days. My son, my older child, 39 years old, name of Jaden, called me on a Sunday while I could hear his kids screaming in the background and the particular divided quality in his voice that told me he was watching something on the television and had called me during a commercial. He said, "Dad, you've got nothing to worry about. We're all going to be there." Then, with what I can only describe as impressive smoothness, he transitioned directly into asking whether I'd looked into refinancing the house recently. Rates were decent, he said. Just something to consider. Just thinking out loud. My daughter, 35 years old, her name is Adrian, sent me a text message with a string of heart emojis, and then called the following evening to explain that she'd been meaning to call all week. She was sorry. She was overwhelmed. Her husband Miles had a project at work that had consumed everything. The kids had activities. She had activities. Life was just a lot right now, Dad. You know how it is. She would absolutely be there. She would figure out the schedule and make it work. She used the phrase, "I've got you," 3 times in a 7-minute call, which averages out to once every 2 1/3 minutes, which is, I think, a frequency record for reassurance, without a single logistical detail to back it up. And then there was Miles. Miles is my son-in-law, and I want to be careful about how I describe him because I have tried my whole life to be a fair man. Miles is not a bad person. Miles is the kind of person who exists in the middle distance of his own life. Close enough to smile when it's required, far enough away that nothing actually costs him anything. He texted me 2 weeks before the surgery. The text said, "Hang in there, Bernard. Adrian and I are thinking of you. Adrian and I, together. Unified." As though they had authored a single thought between the 2 of them and sent it off signed jointly like a Christmas card from people who bought it at the drugstore at the last minute. I want to tell you something about the morning of the surgery, because I have not told this to anyone, and I think it matters. I woke up at 4:50 in the morning in my house on Millbrook Drive. The house was the kind of quiet that large houses get when only one person has lived in them for 5 years, since my wife Sandra passed. Not peaceful quiet, a waiting quiet, the kind that has weight to it. I made coffee I wasn't going to be allowed to drink. I sat in the chair by the kitchen table, where Sandra used to sit across from me every morning, for 31 years. The chair is still there. I have not moved it. The autumn light was coming in thin and flat across the linoleum the way October light does in Ohio, and I sat there and I thought, if something goes wrong today. The last message I received from my daughter was a row of heart emojis, and the last conversation I had with my son ended with him asking about my mortgage rate. I thought about that for a good while. Then I called a cab. I checked myself in at the front desk of Kettering Health Main Campus at 6:15 in the morning. I handed my phone and my wallet to a nurse named Priscilla, who had the particular calm of someone who has spent 20 years watching people walk into surgery alone, and has decided to be gentle about it, without drawing attention to it. I was in the hospital for 11 days. They had to go back in on day 4 for a complication I will not describe in clinical detail, because the clinical details are not the point. The point is that for approximately 6 hours on the afternoon of day 4, the situation was, in the words of Dr. Abernathy when she came to speak to me afterward, more serious than we would have liked. She said it quietly. I nodded. I have been nodding at things I never asked for my whole life. There is a particular kind of loneliness that only exists in hospital rooms. Not the loneliness I had grown accustomed to in the house on Millbrook Drive after Sandra died, which was the loneliness of absence, of a life being lived by one person where two used to live. This was different. This was the loneliness of machines beeping in the night, and the muffled sounds of other people's family down the hall, the loneliness of watching a door that nobody walked through. The chair in my room was green, a pale institutional green, the color of government waiting rooms, with a small scuff on the left armrest where the vinyl had started to peel. I memorized that chair the way you memorize something you stare at long enough. By day 3, I could have drawn it from memory. Jaden called on day 2. He asked how I was feeling. He asked it the way people ask when they already have an answer in mind and are looking to confirm it. I told him I was recovering. He said that was great. He mentioned almost as an afterthought that he'd heard the Millbrook Drive neighborhood was appreciating in value. Just interesting, he said. Just something he'd seen online. He did not come. Adrienne called every day from day 1 through day 5. I want to be honest about that. She called every day. The calls lasted between 5 and 9 minutes, and they consisted primarily of her explaining why she had not come yet and outlining a theoretical future visit that kept moving forward like a horizon. Day 7 became day 9. Day 9 became this weekend for sure. This weekend for sure became a voicemail on day 8 that said she was so sorry something had come up with Miles's mother. She would explain everything. She loved me so much. I listened to that voicemail twice. Then I set my phone down on the bedside table and looked at the green chair with the peeling armrest, and I felt something settle inside me, not dramatically. Not with any of the noise you might expect from a man who has just had his chest opened and his heart rerouted and is lying alone in a hospital room reading a voicemail about his son-in-law's mother. Quietly, the way a foundation settles, slow and absolute, Miles sent a get-well card, a physical card, which he must have actually purchased and mailed, which required more forethought than anything else he did during those 11 days, and which arrived, by the particular cruelty of postal timing, on day 9, 2 days before I was discharged. It had a lighthouse on it. It said, "Wishing you smooth sailing ahead." I propped it on the windowsill next to the small, succulent plant the nurses had put there to make the room feel less like what it was. On day 7, a nurse named Priscilla. She had been rotated back to my ward, and I was genuinely glad to see a face I recognized, came in to check my oxygen levels and found me staring out the window. She didn't say anything for a moment. She checked the monitor, made a note, then looked over at the empty green chair. She looked at me. She said gently, the way someone speaks when they have decided to say the true thing instead of the easy thing, "Mr. Kowalski, is there someone we should be calling?" I told her I had 2 children and a son-in-law and they all knew where I was. She nodded once, slowly. She adjusted the blanket at the foot of the bed. It didn't need adjusting, and said, "You press that button if you need anything at all. Any hour." I have thought about that blanket adjustment every day since I left that hospital. The smallest gesture, the most precise kindness. The kind of thing you do when you don't know what else to do, but you need the other person to know that someone is paying attention. On day 11, Dr. Abernathy cleared me to go home, shook my hand, and told me my recovery was proceeding well considering. Considering was her word, and I filed it away. A volunteer named Gerald pushed me to the exit in a wheelchair per hospital policy. I called a lift from the curb. The driver was a woman in her late 50s named something I didn't catch, and she had a rosary hanging from the rearview mirror, and a pine air freshener, and a particular brisk warmth that reminded me a little of Sandra. She asked if someone was meeting me at home. I said I had it handled. She nodded the way people nod when they understand they've asked the wrong question, but appreciate the answer anyway. She helped me get my bag to the door. I stood on the porch of the house on Millbrook Drive for longer than made any physical sense. The October air was doing that Ohio thing, where it can't decide between cold and colder, and my sternum ached in a way that Dr. Abernathy had described as normal, and that I would have described differently. I had a walker. I had a discharge packet in a manila folder, and a white paper bag of medications, and absolutely no reason to stand on my own porch like a man waiting for permission to enter his own house. But I stood there. I looked at the front door I had installed myself in 1991. The deadbolt I had replaced twice. The porch light Sandra had picked out from a catalog in 2003. The one with the bronze finish that had gone slightly green at the edges the way bronze does. I stood there, and I looked at all of it. Then I went inside. The house was exactly as I had left it 11 days ago. I want you to understand what that means. When you live alone and you leave for 11 days and you come home and the house is exactly as you left it, it means no one came. Not to take in the mail that had collected in the box by the door. Not to run the kitchen faucet so the pipes didn't sit. Not to check whether the heat was set correctly for an empty house in October. Not just to stand inside the rooms where I live and be present there, the way people who love you are present in your spaces when you cannot be. No one came. I moved through the kitchen slowly, the way you move 11 days after someone has opened your chest and reorganized what was inside. I put the kettle on. I stood at the window and looked out at the backyard. The garden Sandra had planted along the back fence, which I had kept up since she passed because it seemed like the right thing to do. The maple tree we'd put in the year Jaden was born, which was now taller than the house. The wooden glider on the back patio that I had refinished 3 times and intended to refinish a 4th. All of it exactly as I'd left it. I made my tea. I carried it to the chair by the kitchen table. Sandra's chair was across from me, empty. The afternoon light came through the window, at the low October angle, that makes everything look like the last moment of something. I sat there for a long time, just sat, and I thought about 11 days and an empty green chair and a Lighthouse Get-Well card, and a voicemail about Miles's mother, and a nurse adjusting a blanket that didn't need adjusting. I thought about what it means to love people. Sandra and I had talked about this, near the end, when she knew the end was coming, and had decided to use the time well. She said love was not a thing you performed when the stakes were visible enough. She said it was what you did in the Tuesday afternoons of your life. The ordinary, unremarkable Tuesdays when nothing required you to show up and you showed up anyway. She was right. She was almost always right. I had not told her that often enough, which is one of the 2 or 3 regrets I carry around with me, like stones in a coat pocket. I finished my tea. I set the cup down carefully, because my hands still had a slight tremor from the medications, and I picked up the phone. Not to call Jaden, not Adrian, not Miles. I called a man named Clifton Webb, my attorney of 22 years, patient and exact in the way that good attorneys are patient and exact, and I told him what I needed. He listened without interrupting for 9 minutes. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Bernard, are you sure about all of this?" I told him I had been sure since day 7. He said he would have documents ready by the end of the month. I thanked him, hung up, and went to look at Sandra's garden through the kitchen window for a while, and then I went to bed. Now, I want to tell you something about electricians, because I think it matters to understanding what happened next. In electrical work, the principle people most often misunderstand is this. The wire does not care about your intentions. It does not respond to what you meant to do, or what you planned to do, or what you would have done if circumstances had been different. It responds to what you actually did. The current goes where the connection exists. That is not cruelty. That is physics. 6 weeks after my discharge, I called Jaden and Adrian and told them I was hosting Sunday dinner. I said I was feeling like myself again and I wanted to see the family. I cooked a pot roast the way my mother used to make it, low and slow with potatoes and carrots, and the particular smell that means Sunday to me the same way it has meant Sunday my whole life. I set the table properly. I put on some music low in the background. What I was doing was allowing them to show me who they were standing in my kitchen with full information available to them. I was going to observe, and I was going to remember, and I was going to let the current go where the connections actually ran. Jaden arrived with his wife Tamara and their 2 boys. He brought a bottle of wine and the specific energy of a man who has thought about this visit and decided to put his best self forward. He hugged me. He held it a beat longer than usual. Then his eyes did a slow, unhurried tour of the room. The baseboards I'd refinished. The built-in bookcase I'd installed in 2008. The original hardwood under the rug. Back to me with a warm smile. "Place looks great, Dad," he said. "It looks the same as it always has," I said. "I know, yeah, it looks great." Adrienne came in behind him with Miles and their daughter, and a store-bought dessert in a bakery box. The kind of gesture that means I know I owe more than dessert, but I'm hoping dessert does some of the work. She hugged me for a long time. I could feel in the way she held on that she had been rehearsing this, or not rehearsing exactly, but carrying it, the weight of 11 days not showing up. She sat down and she began to explain, I will not reconstruct it fully because it does not deserve the full reconstruction. There was Miles's mother, who it turned out had not required the attention that had been described in the voicemail. There was a scheduling situation with the kids that had resolved itself approximately 4 days after I was discharged. There were references to how she'd felt terrible, how she'd wanted to come, how she hoped I knew she was with me in spirit. I listened to every word with the complete calm of a man who spent 38 years in walls and ceilings and crawl spaces, reading the actual state of things and not the intended state of things. I told her I understood completely. I passed the pot roast. Miles shook my hand when he came in, with the firm and slightly over-deliberate grip of a man who has read that a firm handshake matters and has been practicing. He told me I looked good. He said the dinner smelled incredible. He complimented the bookcase. I thanked him. I offered him a seat. During dinner, I watched them. The way Jaden kept glancing at the bookcase, and then the window, and then the mantel, taking slow inventory. The way Adrian laughed a little too readily at things I said that were not particularly funny, the laugh of someone compensating. The way Miles ate with the uncomplicated appetite of a man who has not examined his own conscience too carefully and is therefore comfortable. Then I set down my fork. I said I'd been doing some thinking since the surgery, about getting my affairs in order. You know how it is at 67 with a heart that needed work. It just makes you think. The table adjusted, not dramatically. But I have been reading rooms since before any of them were born. Jaden said very carefully that that sounded very sensible. Adrian said, of course, that was such a responsible thing to do. Miles said, I think I've got a guy, if you need a financial planner. I picked up my fork and said, more potatoes? What happened over the next several months had the particular quality of something that has been engineered correctly. Jaden began calling every Saturday morning at 9, not 9:15, 9. He asked about my appetite, my sleep, my cardiac rehab progress, the follow-up appointments. He was warm and attentive and thorough. And after about 12 minutes of genuine seeming devotion, he would find his way, with the naturalness of a man who has practiced it, to some question about the house. Had I thought about what I'd want to do with the property long term? Had I talked to a financial planner, because Tamara's cousin did that kind of work and was very good? Was I keeping up with the taxes? Just practically speaking, just thinking ahead. I answered each question directly, and gave him nothing he could use. Adrian began stopping by on Wednesday evenings with dinner. Not takeout. Actual cooked food, the kind that requires forethought. A casserole, a roasted chicken. The specific brand of decaffeinated coffee I'd been drinking since the surgery. She was kind company. She asked real questions about how I was feeling, not just how I was doing. She told me things about her life, real things, not performed things. And sitting across from her at my kitchen table on those Wednesday evenings, eating food she had made for me, I felt something I had not expected to feel. It was grief. Not for what was happening now, which was good, but for what could have been happening all along. For the version of my daughter who might have gotten in her car on day 3 or day 6 or day 9 and driven the 43 minutes to Dayton and sat in that green institutional chair and just been there. That Adrian, the one with the roasted chicken and the real questions. She had been available the whole time. I drank my coffee and talked with her about her daughter's school play and her garden plans for spring. And I was, as I have always been with my children, warm. Because that is not a performance. That is simply who I am. Miles, to his modest credit, began texting roughly once a week. Short messages, grammatically reasonable, checking in. It was given his baseline notable. I replied to each one in full sentences, because Sandra raised me right. One Thursday evening in February, Adrian was at the house, and we were sitting with our coffee after dinner, and she said, very quietly, without build-up, that she was sorry about the hospital. She said it simply. No scaffolding, no qualifications, no new reasons for the old absence. She just said, Dad, I'm sorry I didn't come, I should have been there. I looked at my daughter across the kitchen table, 43 minutes away. 11 days, green chair. I said, I know. Not that it was fine because it was not fine. Not that she should put it out of her mind because she should not entirely put it out of her mind. Just, I know. I meant it. I set my coffee cup down and we kept talking, and that was its own kind of resolution, the kind that doesn't require either party to pretend the thing didn't happen and doesn't require either party to keep the wound open either. Jaden has not apologized. I am not holding a door open for him on that point. It may come, or it may not. The electricity does not wait for your apology. It simply responds to the actual state of the connections. On a Saturday in early March, I am on the back patio of the house on Millbrook Drive, with my coffee and my cardiac rehab exercises done, and the Ohio morning doing what Ohio mornings do in March, which is to be uncertain and provisional and sort of blustery and entirely like itself. Sandra's garden along the back fence is not blooming yet, but it is beginning to think about it. The dark soil turning that particular shade that means life is organizing itself underground, where you can't see it yet. I planted those roses with her in the spring of 1997. The year Adrian graduated from high school. Sandra chose the variety. She said she wanted something that would keep coming back without requiring constant reassurance, which is, I have always thought, an excellent thing to want. I sip my coffee. The maple we planted when Jaden was born creaks slightly in the wind. A neighbor's dog announces something 3 yards over with one single bark, and then is satisfied with that. Somewhere down the street, someone is warming up a car engine, the specific rattle of a cold morning start, a sound so ordinary and so Ohio that I have heard it approximately 10,000 times, and it still means something to me I can't name. My chest feels good, better than it has in years, which is the strange, dark joke of the whole ordeal. They opened me up and repaired what was failing, and now the engine runs cleaner than it has in a decade. I made a donation in January to the Kettering Health Foundation, a specific fund for patient support services. The kind of fund that pays for things like better chairs in recovery rooms and small comforts for people who are healing alone. I made it in the name of Priscilla, the nurse who adjusted a blanket that didn't need adjusting. I did not tell anyone. There are 2 charitable organizations in my will now, where 2 children's names used to be. The first is a veterans support organization out of Cincinnati, because I believe in showing up for people who held things together when no one showed up for them. The second is a vocational training scholarship at Sinclair Community College here in Dayton, because 38 years ago, a man I barely knew took the time to show a 22-year-old kid how circuits actually work, and that was worth more to me than I can calculate, and I want to pass something like it forward. The house on Millbrook Drive, the hardwood floors I laid myself, the bookcase I built in 2008, Sandra's garden, the maple tree, goes to the estate to be distributed to those same organizations. Clifton knows. He has known since November. He is a patient and precise man, and he will handle everything exactly as specified. There is also a letter, handwritten, 1 page in my regular block printing, the clear, careful lettering of a man who spent 4 decades writing circuit labels that had to be readable in poor light. It is addressed to Jaden and Adrian to be opened when the time comes. It says this: by the time you read this, you will have questions. I want to answer the one that matters most, because I spent 38 years in this trade, and I believe in accurate information. I was in the hospital for 11 days following open heart surgery. The surgery was on October 9th. I was discharged on October 20th. I came home in a car I ordered from my phone. I had told you the date 8 weeks in advance. I am not writing this with anger. I am past anger. I am writing this because in my trade we call accurate documentation the most important part of the job. Before you leave a house, you label every wire. You leave a record of the actual state of things, not the intended state, not the hoped-for state, the actual state, so that whoever comes after you understands exactly what they are working with. The actual state, as of October 9th through October 20th, was an empty chair. I want you to know that I love you, both of you. That did not change, and it will not change, and the letter would not be accurate if I left that out. The decisions in this document are not the opposite of love. They are the honest record of a man who understood the difference between love and reliability, and who spent the last years of his life grateful for the Tuesday afternoons, whenever they came, and clear-eyed about the Octobers. Your mother would have said it better. She usually did. Bernard Kowalski. Adrian is coming for dinner on Wednesday. She is bringing her daughter, who has recently developed an interest in my tool collection, and asked last week if she could see the workshop. I said yes, of course. I showed her how to read a circuit diagram. She is 9 years old, and she followed it with more patience than most adults I have trained. Sandra would have found that entirely unsurprising. I look out at the garden. The roses are beginning to push their first green. right on time, same as every year, same as they have been doing since 1997, whether or not anyone was watching, whether or not anyone remembered to be there. There is one additional thing I want to say, and then I am going to go inside and call Clifton, because there is one small amendment I want to make. One thing I decided this morning over coffee that feels right. The scholarship at Sinclair. I am going to request that preference be given to students who are the first in their family to pursue a trade. Kids who didn't grow up with someone showing them how things work. Kids who figured out on their own that the way to understand anything is to find the actual wire, trace it back to the source, and understand what the connection actually is, not what it was supposed to be. Because that is what I did. My whole life. At work and, in the end, at home too. The maple is swaying just slightly in the March wind. The roses are coming back. The coffee has gone a little cold, which is fine. Cold coffee on a March morning on the back patio of a house I built into what it is. That is not a problem. That is just a Saturday. The will is written. The connections are documented. Everything is exactly where it needs to be.